Hello, YouTubers, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shields, deaths, light stars, peasants, vassals, magnums. I'm a useful idiot. And today I want to talk about a pet peeve of mine, and that's corporate rock whores. And this comes up again recently because I saw this new Chrysler Bob Dylan commercial. And it's disappointing enough to see an old icon like Bob Dylan, certainly one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, and now he's pandering cars for Chrysler. And of course, part of the irony of that is that Chrysler is now an American company owned by Fiat, entirely owned by Fiat, an Italian company. So for Bob Dylan to be pandering Chrysler as if it is a great American company is ironic, to say the least. And I understand how this dynamic works, with especially a lot of these career rock artists like Bob Dylan and U2 and the Rolling Stones and the like. And they have to be savvy, and at some point, teenage rebellion and being outrageous turns into a career that spans decades. And I understand that. And a lot of these groups are certainly no longer relevant. I wouldn't call the Rolling Stones relevant, although I have to admit that they can still put out a record that ends up having 3 or 4 or 5 songs that are almost as good as anything they've ever done. But of course, one thing that separates rock as it progresses into middle age and old age is it loses one of its best qualities, and that's being dangerous. One of the things that makes rock art and can make rock art is the fact that it can be dangerous. And so the point now that we've arrived at where rock and roll in general, and certainly all these big old rock icons are now commodified. And the very idea of rock as a vehicle for rebellion has been commodified. So it's still ironic that people still embrace rock and roll as an art form of rebellion. And this continues to fester, I suppose, because there's still an underground where a lot of bands can do some pretty outrageous things, and their rebellion continues against their corporate rock brothers. But one of the things to understand about these corporate rock whores is that it's all part of an opportunity, and they have to grasp at it along the way. And sometimes it helps enhance the profile and visibility of their music. John Lee Hooker comes to mind. But it is still disturbing to see the likes of Bob Dylan doing an auto commercial, or hearing Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges in a Nike commercial for the first time, or hearing your favorite Led Zeppelin songs in Cadillac commercials. It just shows that all this rock has been commodified, and its vitality, its ability to change the world, its ability to create art, its ability to be dangerous are all challenged now. And this is in an age when a lot of these big stars like Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and U2 are millionaires, if not billionaires, and that is their peer group now. That is who they relate to. And it's also borne out by the fact that the tickets for these massive shows are hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for tickets. And they have to have these giant corporate sponsors. And one of the reasons why they have to have these giant corporate sponsors is because to have these giant mega shows, and let me remind you that the whole reason punk rock came along in the mid-'70s was because of this whole spectacle of gigantic rock shows, and with hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for tickets, like I mentioned here. Here's a good example. In 2011, U2's world tour took 6 747 jets. It cost $850,000 a day to run this tour for 18 months tour. They logged 70,000 miles on a private jet for the band. They had to haul around 390-ton stages shipped around the globe for this tour. The crew and staff of 200 people, and 65,000 tons of CO2 emitted for this show. So that gets to the heart of what I'm driving at overall as far as corporate rock whores. For example, Bono and U2, of course, extol the virtues of green energy and saving the planet, yet their world tour generates 65,000 tons of CO2. And but these massive shows, I mean, is it really necessary? Is it really necessary to ship around literally 1,000 tons of stages worldwide, globally? It certainly creates a cottage industry for the minions for the band U2. But let me get back to this corporate whore general discussion. Another event that happened recently, incidentally during the Super Bowls, not only was there a Bob Dylan ad for Chrysler, but there was a U2 ad for working with Bank of America. And of course, the irony of this is that Bono certainly used to lament about feeling the frustration and anger of Occupy Wall Street. And yet here he is now working with the very bank at the heart of the beast, Bank of America. And of course, he justifies it. He says, what does he say? Quote, Moynihan, Brian Moynihan, the head of Bank of America, said, quote, Bono came up with the idea to get a commercial with us. The aim is to create heat and energy, unquote. Whatever the hell that means. Gotta love a banker talking about U2 and rock and roll and bringing heat and energy. And Bono went on to say, quote, Bank of America are spending all this money at the Super Bowl, but would normally just be to say, here's Bank of America. But this is very subtle. It's to raise awareness. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, Bono, but there's hardly anything subtle about it. It popped out of the screen, and the irony and hypocrisy was apparent right off the bat. And Bono's naive if he thinks that Bank of America is not getting a cheap public relations deal out of this. What's happening here is that U2 played this song during the Super Bowl, and Bank of America teamed with U2. And if you download that song, Bank of America will contribute $1 every time somebody downloads it, and it will go to the U2 Foundation Red for AIDS awareness. And then on top of that, Bank of America is going to give one $10 million donation, which of course is a tax write-off and also is chump change for Bank of America. But for U2, that's a nice little piece of change there. And some other things about Bono and U2 and this Bank of America commercial. Bono said that, quote, initially they were wary of working with the bank, but in the ends justifies the means, unquote. He went on to say that, quote, when we looked at Bank of America and got to know Brian Moynihan, we saw that values were important to them. Like the $8.5 billion fine they're paying for foreclosure fraud. So that's some of the Bank of America values. And Bono went on to say and that they were trying to compensate for the financial mess, unquote. That's a quaint way of putting it, Bono, the financial mess. They're trying to compensate for that by giving $10 million to Bono and U2. So Bono went on to say, quote, but to be honest, even if they weren't decent, but were willing to give us $10 million, I would still be sitting here. And there's the bottom line. Just show me the money. As always, it's about show me the money. And, some of the background on U2 and Bono, they're a perfect example of the ultimate corporate rock whores. And I don't mean to pick on them. I'm a big champion of the idea that you separate the personal lives of somebody who is an artist. And there's certainly some debate as to whether U2 and Bono are artists. They certainly have some characteristics of that. But it's so to hold their personal lives up against their music sometimes is unfair. So I don't want it to take anything away from whatever good music U2 may or may not have made in their lifetimes. But the real problem is the fact that Bono is much more than a musician. He is a world leader in some respects because he has his own private equity fund. He has a giant foundation, one, that has people like Condoleezza Rice, Larry Summers, and Howard Buffett of Coca-Cola, ConAgra, and ADM on its board. And then he also has this other foundation, Red. And his friends, the people he hangs out with, are Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Al Gore and George Bush and John McCain and Bill Gates and Tony Blair. These are his friends. So what do you think? How much connection to the real world and the vitality of rock? What kind of credibility is Bono having? Or when that's his peer group, those are the people he likes to hang out with. And another good example of some corporate rock whore behaviors. Bono says countries must send more aid to Africa, quote, even if need be by paying more taxes, unquote. So who is Bono to suggest the rest of the world and the United States we need to pay more taxes to send more foreign aid to Africa? I think America's probably doing a pretty good job there already. And then we have to remember, too, that Bono doesn't talk about tax fairness, and why would he? Because U2 moved all their companies to Netherlands from Ireland for a tax shelter. And the fact is that his big, giant foundations, One and Red, do not pay any taxes as nonprofits. And in fact, I heard information that One, almost 90% of their money goes to run the organization, the bureaucracy, and hardly any of the money actually goes to the causes that he champions. So it's just another one of those charity scams that I've talked about before. And then Bono owns 2.3% of Facebook, too, so he's perfectly down with the surveillance society. And he bought it in 2009 for $90 million. Now it's worth $1.5 billion. So Bono is a billionaire, and all his friends are billionaires, and that's who his interests in his focus is going to be on now. And for me, that does take away from their music, and unfortunately, the relevance of, like I say, a band like U2 is moot at this point. And I'm going to finish up with talking about rock whores, corporate rock whores, by bringing up a quote from Harry Brown. He recently wrote a book about Bono and U2, and what he says is that, quote, for nearly 3 decades as a public figure, Bono has been amplifying elite discourses, advocating ineffective solutions, patronizing the poor, and kissing the asses of the rich and powerful, unquote. Well, I can't sum it up any better than that. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.